On the day of the divorce, my ex-husband looked me in the eyes and said, "You'll never recover from this, Sarah. Look at you. Almost 40 years old, fat, no career, no savings for the future. Get real. No one's going to want you." He said that, looking at me, measuring my 216-pound body from top to bottom, mocking my swollen eyes from crying so much, and smiled shamelessly. Like he was doing me a favor being honest. Little did he know what was about to happen. But before I start telling you, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, because we always have stories as good as this one here. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, and I ate it with pleasure. Today all he can do is watch me from his window, because yes, I turned my life around. I have a boyfriend 10 years younger than him, who if I showed you even you'd be jealous. And him? He's got a beer belly and a wife who screams at him for staring at me through the window while I swim in my pool. Irony of fate? Oh no, this was the work of my own hands. But let me tell you how I got here, because the humiliation didn't start with the divorce. It started years before. When I weighed 216 pounds and my 46-year-old husband, 8 years older than me, looked at me with disgust disguised as concern. My name is Sarah. I'm 38 years old. I was married to David for 14 years. We don't have kids. We tried for years. I did treatments, took hormones that made me gain even more weight. Each negative test was a stab in my chest. And David blamed me, not directly, but you could feel it, through the venomous comments he always made. Maybe if you took better care of yourself, things would be different. The doctor said weight affects fertility, Sarah. You heard that, right? Amber from my company runs marathons. She's 26 and looks 20. Her discipline is incredible. Amber, his secretary, skinny, young, fit, posted gym photos every single day. I saw David liking every photo. Everyone. And I was at home eating ice cream, crying because another month had passed without pregnancy, and my husband clearly preferred looking at his secretary. David built a financial consulting company. I helped. I landed his first account. I introduced him to half his initial clients. I handled the books when he couldn't afford to hire an accountant. For 8 years, I carried that company on my back while he built his reputation and bank account. And when the money started flowing in, when he hired Amber at 24 beautiful and ambitious, I became dead weight. Literally, October 2023. I was making dinner when David came home different, serious, nervous, sat at the table without taking his eyes off his phone. I served him pasta he always loved. He didn't touch it. We need to talk, I knew. Somehow I always knew. I'll be direct. I'm not happy, Sarah. I haven't been for years. I want a divorce, just like that. Like someone asking for a divorce from a bad contract. Not from 14 years of marriage. Not from the woman who held him when his father died. Not from the person who woke up at 5 a.m. to make him coffee before work. Is it Amber? He didn't even bother to deny it properly. This isn't about her, but it was. Obviously it was. 3 days later, he confessed. 6-month affair. Lawyer already hired. Apartment already rented. Exit planned while I thought we were trying to save our marriage and have a child. And then came the words. The ones he repeated when we signed the papers. The ones I'll never forget. You'll never recover. You're almost 40. You're fat, no real career, no savings of your own. I built everything while you played housewife. Amber is young, ambitious, everything you're not. Keep the old furniture. I'm starting fresh with someone who actually has a future. Get real. No one's going to want you. I tried to say I supported him when he had nothing. He laughed in my face. Supported? You existed. That's not a contribution. The divorce was quick. He had expensive lawyers. I had one my sister recommended. 30/70 settlement. I got 30% because the company was built by him. Conveniently forgetting I was there from day one. 30 days to leave the house. My house. Where I lived for 12 years. Where I painted every wall. Where I planted roses in the garden thinking I'd grow old there. David and Amber moved to a mansion in the fanciest neighborhood. 3 months later, they got married. Posted photos from Bali, Paris, Maldives. Perfect life. Him at 46 with a beer belly posing next to her at 26 with a model's body. Comments kissing their asses. You guys are beautiful together. True love. Made me nauseous. And me? I rented a 2-bedroom apartment in a forgotten neighborhood. Cried every night. Antidepressants. Therapy for months trying to understand how I let my life become this trash. But you know what's funny? The universe has perfect timing. Acidic sense of humor, because 6 months after the divorce, everything changed. And when I say everything, I mean absolutely everything. From money to body. From house to revenge. If you've ever been humiliated by someone who made you feel like garbage, this story is for you. If you've ever wanted to see the face of someone who underestimated you when they realize how wrong they were, you're going to love what comes next. Hit that like because this story only gets more delicious. And I guarantee you, delicious is the perfect word. 6 months after the divorce, I was still living in that tiny apartment. Still crying most nights. Still seeing David and Amber's perfect life all over social media. Beach vacations, fancy restaurants, her in designer workout clothes showing off her abs, him looking at her the way he never looked at me. I was in therapy twice a week, on 2 different antidepressants, wondering if David had been right, if maybe I really wouldn't recover, if this was just who I was now, the fat ex-wife living in a forgotten neighborhood eating ice cream for dinner. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Ms. Harrison, this is Robert Chen from Chen & Associates. I'm calling regarding your late Aunt Dorothy's estate. Aunt Dorothy. My mom's older sister. I'd met her maybe 5 times in my life. She'd been a recluse. No kids, no husband. Lived alone in a house outside Seattle investing in stocks. I'd visited her once at a nursing home 12 years ago. Brought her flowers. She barely spoke but smiled when I left. I'm sorry for your loss, I said, meaning it even though I barely knew her. Ms. Harrison, your aunt left you her entire estate. After taxes, approximately $2.3 million in liquid assets. Plus her stock portfolio currently valued at $1.8 million. I stopped breathing. Actually stopped breathing. Had to make him repeat it twice. There must be a mistake. I barely knew her. No mistake. She left a note. Said you were the only family member who visited her. Even once, that you brought her yellow roses. Her favorites. She never forgot that. $4.1 million. From one visit with yellow roses 12 years ago. From 15 minutes of kindness I'd barely remembered. What do I need to do? I'll send the paperwork. Should take about 6 weeks to finalize everything. I hung up. Sat on my couch staring at nothing. $4.1 million. Enough to never worry about money again. Enough to do anything. Be anyone. And right then I made a decision. I wasn't going to tell anyone. Not my sister. Not my friends. Definitely not David. I wanted to see who cared about me when I had nothing. Who stayed when I was fat and broke and depressed. More importantly, I wanted to figure out who I was without anyone's opinions or expectations or pity. The money hit my account 8 weeks later. I stared at the number on my phone for an hour. $4,127,000 after taxes and fees. More money than I'd ever imagined having. More money than David's company was probably worth. First thing I did? Nothing. Kept living in the apartment. Kept driving my 10-year-old Honda. Kept dressing the same. Kept being invisible. But now I was invisible by choice. Not because I had to be. I took online courses. Marketing. Business, investment strategy. I wasn't going to blow this money. I was going to multiply it. Build something real. Something mine. 3 months after getting the inheritance, I opened my own digital marketing agency. Small, quiet, just me and my laptop. Took on 3 clients. Local businesses that needed help but couldn't afford big agencies. Charged reasonable rates. Did excellent work, started building reputation, building confidence. Building something David could never take away. And every night I'd see his posts with Amber. Their perfect life. His comments on her gym photos. So proud of my beautiful wife. Made me want to vomit. But it also made me determined. I had money now. I had time. I had nothing to lose and everything to prove. And I knew exactly where to start. At the gym. With the body David said no one would want. Time to show him what transformation really looked like. I joined a gym 2 blocks from my apartment. Not the fancy one where Amber posted her photos. Somewhere quiet where nobody knew me. First day, I walked in at 216 pounds, wearing baggy sweatpants, feeling like everyone was staring. Probably nobody was. But it felt like they all were. I was on the treadmill going maybe 2 miles per hour when someone stopped next to me. Guy late 30s, fit, but not obnoxiously so. He introduced himself as Richard, personal trainer there. Said showing up was the hardest part, and I was already winning just by being there. Something about his voice made me believe him. Not pity. Just genuine kindness. I came back the next day. And the next. By week 2, I was going 5 times a week. Richard started giving me small tips without pushing. How to adjust machines. Better form. What to focus on. By month 2, we were friends. He'd check in. Celebrate small wins. Made it feel possible. One night after a good workout, he asked if I wanted a protein shake. We sat there an hour talking about everything. Why we were both at the gym at 7 p.m. on a Wednesday. At some point, Richard said I was working out like someone angry, like I was proving something. I stared at my shake. He was right. Every workout was me screaming at David in my head. Every mile was proving I wasn't worthless. I asked if that was bad. Richard said not bad. Just make sure eventually I was doing it for me. Not just to prove him wrong. 8 months in, I'd lost 60 pounds. Down to 156. Toned, fit, stronger than ever. My clothes didn't fit anymore, so I went shopping. Actually shopping. Trying things on. Feeling good in my skin for the first time in years. Richard noticed immediately. Said I looked happy. I told him I felt happy for the first time in forever. By month 9, something else had changed. Richard wasn't just my trainer anymore. The way he looked at me had shifted. The way I looked at him definitely had. We'd grab dinner after workouts. Text random things during the day. One night he walked me to my car and stood there for a long moment before asking if he could take me on an actual date. A real one. I smiled, feeling my face heat up, and said yes. We kissed. First kiss in over a year. Soft. Sweet. Perfect. For the first time since the divorce, I felt like maybe David had been wrong. Maybe someone did want me, not in spite of who I was. But because of who I was becoming, my agency was doing well. 15 clients, $18,000 monthly. I'd turned that $4.1 million into $5.2 million through smart investing. Richard and I had been dating 4 months. He was everything David wasn't. One night at his place, he got a notification and mentioned a house next to his old client's place had just gone up for sale at a crazy price. I asked which client? He said some guy named David. Total ass who used to train him and his wife before they got rich and dropped Richard immediately. My stomach dropped. I asked David who. He said David Harrison. I started laughing so hard Richard looked concerned. That was my ex-husband, the one who said nobody would want me. Richard's face went from confused to wicked. He showed me his phone. Beautiful house right next door to David's mansion. 4 bedrooms, pool, deck, $1.2 million at auction. Richard said I should buy it. I said that was insane. He asked, was it though? I had the money, and the look on David's face when he saw me next door would be priceless. I thought about showing up thin and successful with Richard while David had a beer belly. Told Richard I'd need to see it first. He grinned and said he'd set it up. The house was perfect. Heated pool, deck overlooking David's yard. I could see his house from the master bedroom. Bought it cash. $1.2 million, closed in a week. Moving day, I made sure it was Saturday so David would be home. Had a BMW delivered. Hired movers. Broad daylight. I was directing furniture when I saw him walking to his car. He stopped dead. Looked at me. Did a double take because I looked nothing like the woman he'd divorced. I waved friendly like we were old friends. He stood frozen, then got in his car and left without saying anything. That night, Richard came over. We christened the pool. Laughed about David probably watching from his window. I didn't text David, didn't call. Just let him wonder how the fat broke wife he'd thrown away bought a house next door for cash. 3 days later, Amber showed up at my door. I'd been expecting her. Amber stood on my porch in workout clothes. Always in workout clothes, perfect abs showing. She tried to smile but couldn't quite pull it off. Started with that fake friendly tone saying hi. She was Amber from next door, thought she should introduce herself properly. Like we didn't both know who the other was, I invited her in. Her eyes immediately scanned everything. Expensive art, nice furniture. She commented how beautiful the place was. Must have cost a fortune. I said it was reasonable, foreclosure pricing. She nodded, but you could see her calculating. Then came the fishing question, saying David had mentioned I'd come into some money, maybe an inheritance. I kept it vague. Offered her coffee or water. She said water was fine. Led her to the living room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the pool. She kept looking outside, taking it all in. Mentioned she and David were married, said he'd told her we grew apart. Grew apart. That's how he was spinning it to her. She said she was glad there was no weirdness. David had been worried it might be awkward having me next door. Her jaw was tight, though. Something bothering her already. Then she switched gears, saying David had mentioned I'd been at the gym a lot, lost weight, looked great. I thanked her and said I needed the change. Then came the real question. She asked if I was seeing someone, said David had mentioned seeing a guy here. There it was. I told her about Richard, my boyfriend, mentioned he was a personal trainer, and that's how we met. Her smile got even tighter. She said that was nice, mentioned David had been talking about getting back in shape. He'd put on weight since they got married. I knew. I'd seen him through the window. Beer belly, thinning hair, looking every day of his 47 years. We made small talk another 10 minutes. She asked about my work. I kept it vague. She talked about their travel, David's company, how busy and successful they were, all the things she felt she needed to prove to her husband's ex-wife who was supposed to have ended up broke and miserable. Finally, she left. But not before glancing one more time at the pool. At my house. At everything proving David had been wrong about me. That night, Richard and I were in the pool when I saw David at his bedroom window. Just standing there watching, not even trying to hide it. Richard noticed too and asked if I wanted him to wave. I said let him look, let him see exactly what he threw away. We kissed, stayed another hour. Didn't hide anything. Later that night, I heard yelling next door. Amber's voice high and angry. David's lower but defensive. Couldn't make out words, but the tone was clear. They were fighting. About me. About the ex-wife who was supposed to never recover. Who was now next door, thin, successful, happy with a guy 10 years younger than David, who looked like a fitness model, while David looked like middle-aged crisis personified. I poured wine. Sat on my deck. Smiled at the stars. Karma was slow, but thorough. Subscribe if you believe people get what they deserve. Do you think David's about to realize he made a massive mistake? Because what happened next proved that humiliating someone is easy. Watching them succeed after you wrote them off? That's torture. The fights next door got louder over the next 2 weeks. I didn't try to listen, but sound carries when you're in the backyard and their bedroom window faces mine. Amber's voice was always loudest, sharp, accusatory. I'd catch phrases like staring at her again, and your ex-wife, and she's half your age. That last one made me smile. I was 8 years younger than David. Richard was 10 years younger than him. Math was working in my favor. David would respond quieter, defensive, always an excuse. Never an admission. I made sure to swim every morning around 7 a.m., right when David was getting ready for work. Right when his bedroom window had the perfect view of my pool. I'd wear a normal bikini. Nothing crazy, but I looked good and I knew it. Black. Classic. Showed off what 14 months of work had created. Some mornings I'd see David's silhouette in the window. Just standing there, watching. Other mornings the yelling would start before I even got out of the pool. One Saturday morning, Richard came over early with coffee. We sat on the deck just talking when David walked into his backyard to get something from the shed. He saw us, froze, stared at Richard for a solid 10 seconds. Richard without a shirt showing abs and arms. Everything David used to have 20 years ago. David looked down at his own stomach. Beer belly pushing against his t-shirt. Looked back at Richard, then at me. then went back inside without whatever he came out for. Richard asked if that was him. I said yes. He asked if David really said nobody would want me. I confirmed those were his exact words. Richard shook his head and pulled me closer, saying his loss. It really was. 3 weeks after I moved in, David showed up at my door. Sunday afternoon. Richard had just left. I was still in workout clothes. Opened the door and stood there waiting. David said we should talk. I asked about what. He shifted uncomfortably, looking smaller and older than I remembered. Said it was weird having me next door, wanted to clear the air. I told him the air seemed pretty clear to me. He pushed, saying, "Come on. We were married 14 years. That had to count for something." I said it did count until he told me I'd never recover, that nobody would want me, that I had no future. His face reddened. Started saying he was upset, going through a lot, didn't mean it. I cut him off, saying he meant it, and he'd been right to leave because I wouldn't have become this person if I'd stayed with him, so thank you. Genuinely. He did me a favor. That landed. I could see it land. The thing he'd said to destroy me had become the thing that freed me. He tried changing tactics, saying I looked good, really good. He was happy I was doing well. I said I was sure he was. Then came the real reason. He asked if we could just be civil for Amber's sake. There it was. Amber was losing her mind having me next door. Having him watch me, having to see living proof that maybe she wasn't as special as she thought. I said I was perfectly civil. I wave, I smile. I go about my life. If Amber had a problem, that was between them. David ran his hand through his thinning hair, saying it was complicated. I said it sounded like it and wished him good luck with that. Then I closed the door. Didn't slam it. Just closed it. Calm, controlled, final. Heard him stand there another minute before walking away. That night, the fight next door was the worst yet. Loud enough I could make out actual words. Amber screaming that he was still in love with me. David denying it. Amber threatening to leave. David saying she was crazy. Amber throwing something. Glass breaking. Then silence. I poured wine. Sat by my pool. Looked up at the stars. Smiled. Not because their marriage was falling apart, but because mine had, and that falling apart had led me here. To this house, this life, this peace. 2 months after moving in, David showed up again. This time he looked worse. Hair messier. Clothes wrinkled. He'd lost weight, but not in a healthy way. Stress weight. I let him in against my better judgment. He sat on my couch looking around, taking in everything. The success. The peace. Everything he'd said I'd never have. He mentioned my company was doing well. Not a question. I said well enough. Then he admitted he and Amber were having problems. I said I'd noticed. He looked at his hands, saying his business was struggling too. Lost some big clients. Having to downsize. It had been rough. I didn't say anything. Just waited. There was always a reason. Always an ask. Finally he said it. He needed to borrow money. $200,000. Just short term until he closed some new deals. He'd pay me back with interest. I said no. Simple as that. No. He tried pushing, saying he wouldn't ask if he wasn't desperate. I said that's exactly why he was asking. Because he was desperate. 14 years ago, I was desperate. I needed support, understanding, partnership. He gave me criticism, affair, divorce papers. Now he was desperate and thought I owed him what? Kindness he never showed me? He started saying he made mistakes, but I cut him off. Said he made choices. He chose Amber. He chose to humiliate me. He chose to take most of the assets. He chose to tell me I'd never recover. Those weren't mistakes. Those were decisions. Own them. His face went red, angry. There was the David I knew. The one who couldn't handle being told no. He stood up saying fine. He hoped I was happy. Hoped this little revenge made me feel good about myself. I said it wasn't revenge. It was boundaries, self-respect, me finally understanding what I'm worth, which is a lot more than he ever appreciated. He walked to the door, stopped, said I'd changed. I told him I had to. The person I was would have said yes. Would have helped him? Would have put his needs above mine because that's what she always did. That person died when he handed her divorce papers and told her she'd never recover. This person? She did recover. Without him. Because of him leaving. So thank you, again, for being exactly who he was. It forced me to become who I am. David left without another word. I watched him walk back to his house. To his beautiful young wife currently making his life miserable. To his struggling company. To his beer belly and middle-age crisis hitting like a freight train. And I felt nothing. Not joy, not sadness. Not revenge. Just peace. Richard came over that night asking if I was okay. I told him David had asked me for money. $200,000. Richard asked seriously. I said yes and that I'd told him no. Richard asked how I felt. I said good, really good actually. Not because I hurt David, but because I finally chose me. He kissed me and said he was proud of me. We stayed out on the deck for hours, talking, laughing, planning the future. A future I'd built from nothing. A future David said would never exist. A future that proved every single word he'd said wrong. 4 months after I moved in, things next door escalated. The fights became daily. Amber's car would peel out of the driveway at random hours. David would leave late at night. They'd go days without speaking. I could tell because David would try to talk to me more. Casual conversations. Checking in. Always fishing. Always trying to stay connected. One night around 10 p.m. there was a knock. David, drunk or close to it, swaying slightly on my porch, said she'd left. Amber had left saying she was done, that he was still in love with me, that he'd sabotaged their marriage, that he was obsessed. I didn't let him in. Just stood in the doorway creating a barrier. Said I was sorry that happened. He asked if I really was sorry. I said yes, actually. I didn't want anyone to hurt. Even him, he laughed. That bitter drunk laugh saying I was better than him always had been. He just couldn't see it or didn't want to. I told him he should go home and sleep it off. He said he'd been wrong about everything. About me, about us. He saw that now. I said seeing it now doesn't change what happened then. He tried pushing, saying, but it could change what happens next. We could try again. We were good once, could be good again. And there it was. The thing I'd imagined 100 times after the divorce. David realizing his mistake. Wanting me back. Choosing me. A year ago, that moment would have meant everything. Would have validated me. Proven I was worthy. Now? Now it just felt sad. I said no. Simple as that. No. He started with my name, but I cut him off. Said no, we can't try again. Not because I hate him. Not because I want revenge. But because I don't want what we had. I want what I have now. With Richard. With myself. With this life. He was right to leave. I needed him to leave so I could become this person. So thank you, but no. His face crumpled. Like I'd taken his last hope. He said he'd ruined everything. I told him he did. But he also freed me. Both things can be true. Then I closed the door gently and heard him stand there for a while before finally leaving. Richard called right after. I told him what happened. He asked how I felt. I said relieved. Sad for David, but mostly relieved. Richard asked if he'd try again. I said maybe, but it doesn't matter. The answer will always be no. And it was. David tried 3 more times over the next month. Flowers, letters, texts asking to talk. I responded once with a simple message saying, I hope you find peace, but you won't find it with me. Please stop. He did. Finally accepted that what we had was gone. That the woman he'd divorced wasn't coming back. That recovery didn't mean going backwards. Amber came back 2 weeks later. I saw them in the yard talking, trying. She was crying. He was apologizing. They went inside together. Whether they'd make it wasn't my problem. My problem was living my life. And I was doing that beautifully. My agency hit 35 clients. $42,000 monthly. I turned that $5.2 million into $6.1 million through investments. Bought a second property for rental income. Hired 2 employees. Built something sustainable, something mine, something nobody could take away. Richard and I moved in together. Not because we had to. because we wanted to, because what we had was real, built on actual love instead of need or fear or settling. And David? David watched from his window, watched me swim, watched me succeed, watched me be happy, and maybe learned that some people aren't meant to be kept. Some people are meant to be set free, and sometimes setting them free is the worst thing you can do for yourself. A year after moving in next-door, life had settled into something I'd never experienced before. Actual peace. Not the absence of conflict, but the presence of contentment. My business was thriving. 52 clients, $68,000 monthly, 8 employees, office downtown. Real business with real growth. Forbes reached out for a feature on women entrepreneurs over 35. I did the interview. Got photographed in my office looking professional and confident and everything David said I'd never be. The article came out October 15th, titled 38-Year-Old Marketing Maven Builds $1,000,000 Agency After Devastating Divorce. They focused on the comeback angle. From housewife to business owner. The growth. The success. The transformation. My phone exploded. LinkedIn messages. Old colleagues congratulating me. Potential clients. Speaking invitations. Everything that comes with sudden visibility. David saw it. Of course he did. Sent one text saying, "Congratulations, you deserve it." I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Richard and I were planning our future. Talking about marriage, maybe kids, growing old together. All the things I'd wanted with David but never got. Now I was getting them with someone who actually valued me. One Saturday morning, I was in my pool when I saw David and Amber loading suitcases into their car. Lots of suitcases. Moving level suitcases. They were leaving. David saw me watching. Walked over to the fence between our yards saying they were moving. Company was relocating to Seattle. Fresh start. I wished him good luck with that. He stood there for a moment like he wanted to say more. Finally said he was sorry for everything, for how he treated me, for what he said. I was never the problem. He was, I told him I knew. He said he hoped I was happy, really happy that I deserved it. I said I was. Really was. He nodded and started to walk away, then stopped asking if Richard was good to me. I said he was perfect. David said that was good and meant it. They left that afternoon. I watched them drive away. Felt nothing. No joy, no sadness, no vindication. Just nothing. They were part of my past. Important part. Painful part. But still just past. Richard came home that night finding me on the deck. Said he'd seen the moving trucks. Asked how I felt. I thought about it. Really thought about it. Told him I felt free. Completely free. He pulled me close, asking if I had something to tell me. Then he got down on one knee, pulled out a ring. Simple, beautiful, perfect. Said I was the strongest person he knew. I'd taken everything that tried to break me and used it to build something incredible. He wanted to be part of that. Part of my life. Part of my future. Asked if I'd marry him. I said yes. Obviously said yes. Because this was different. This was real. This wasn't about need or fear or proving anything. This was about love. Actual love. We got married 6 months later. Small ceremony, close friends. My sister, his family. People who'd supported us. No drama, no performance. Just love. Standing there in my wedding dress at 40 years old. Successful, fit, happy, loved. I thought about what David had said on the day of the divorce. You'll never recover. Nobody will want you. He'd been so wrong. I'd recovered beyond anything he could have imagined. And someone didn't just want me. Someone chose me, valued me, loved me for exactly who I was. 2 years after the divorce. 3 years since David first said those words that shattered me. A lifetime since I was that 216-pound woman crying in a small apartment wondering if I'd ever be okay. Today I'm 40, married to Richard, running a company that bills $1.2 million annually, living in the house I bought with my own money, in the body I built with my own work, with the confidence I earned through my own transformation. David lives in Seattle now. I heard through mutual acquaintances he and Amber are still together. Still trying. I hope they make it. Genuinely. Not because I forgive what he did, but because I don't need his failure for my success. Someone asked me recently if I regret those 14 years with David. If I wish I'd left earlier. Saved myself the pain. Honest answer? No. Those 14 years taught me what I didn't want. The pain taught me what I could survive. The humiliation taught me my own strength. David leaving me was the worst thing that ever happened, because I didn't just recover. I transformed. Became someone I'd never have been if I'd stayed comfortable. If I'd stayed safe. If I'd stayed with someone who diminished me. Do I wish it had been easier? Of course. Do I wish I'd been valued sooner? Absolutely. But I can't change the past. I can only build the future, and my future is beautiful. Not because I proved David wrong, but because I proved myself right. Some people will always underestimate you. Let them. Their opinion isn't your reality. Some people will always say you can't. Let them. Their limits aren't yours. Some people will always leave. Let them. Not everyone is meant to see your full potential. My message to anyone going through what I went through: you will recover. You will rebuild. You will become someone you never imagined. It won't be easy. It won't be fast. But it will be worth it. And one day you'll wake up in a life you built from ruins and realize the person who destroyed you actually set you free. They took away your old life so you could build a new one. They broke your heart so you could build it stronger. David said I'd never recover. Said nobody would want me. Said I had no future. He was catastrophically wrong about all of it. I recovered so thoroughly I forgot to hate him. Someone didn't just want me. Someone married me. And my future? It's more than I ever dreamed when I was crying in that apartment wondering if pain would ever end. If you've been told you're not enough, this story is for you. If you've been left by someone who claimed to love you, this is for you. If you've ever doubted you could rebuild, listen carefully. You can. You will. You'll be better than you ever were before. Subscribe if you believe in transformation. Leave your comment if you believe the people who hurt us sometimes do us the biggest favors. Share. If you know someone who needs to hear that recovery isn't just possible, it's inevitable, because that's the truth. The real truth. The ending David never imagined. I didn't just survive. I thrived. And that's not revenge. That's just life. Beautiful, messy, perfect life that I built with my own hands.